What's up, everybody? Caleb Dennison with Digital Trends, and today we're doing something I never thought I would do, and that is comparing a Sony against a Vizio. So if you followed Vizio for a while, you know how they got started. Basically a budget brand that you would find in Costco. You got the TVs because they were cheap, not necessarily because they were extremely good. Accessible TVs, that was Vizio's thing for a while, and then they kind of morphed into more of a value brand where you got very good picture quality, still at an excellent price. Now things have kind of changed. Vizio has a much wider range of TVs, and you can still get a budget set, you can still get a value-oriented set, but now you can also get a truly premium TV. That's the Vizio P-Series Quantum X here versus the Sony X950G. Believe it or not, these TVs cost exactly the same. So with a 75-inch variant, as you see here, you're gonna spend about $3,500 with either Sony or Vizio. And with a 65-inch version, same thing, it's about $2,200. We are unfortunately pitting a 75 against a 65. I wish that this TV was bigger or this one was smaller, but hey, it's what we've got. Anyway, we expect the picture quality for any size variant to be roughly the same. Let's start out with the aesthetic differences between the TV, or rather similarities, because there's more that's similar than is different. First off, bezels. Both have very thin bezels, although the Vizio edges out the Sony in this regard. Sorry about that. But it's a little bit thinner than the Sony, but not distinctly so. Also, I like that Vizio puts their badge in the very right-hand lower corner, and it's rather inconspicuous versus Sony's smack dab in the middle. But the thing that we really need to talk about here are the foot stands. They are the sort that extend almost to the edge of the TV, thus taking up a considerable amount of space. As I've pointed out in the unboxing videos for both of these TVs, they are not reversible, so you can't just, flip them inward. So if you're going to stand mount the TV, you're going to need a significant amount of space. Fortunately for us, we own the BDI corridor, and it's made for TVs about this size. Or if you're wall mounting, no big deal. And if you are wall mounting, know that both TVs are relatively thin. I mean, they both have full array, locally dimmed backlights, and those systems require a little bit of space. So they're not wafer thin like some of the TVs you see out there, but they are suitably thin considering that backlight technology. And hey, you're getting a whole lot of performance boost out of that backlight technology. So learn to love it. Next, let's talk about the HDMI inputs. And those of you who watch my videos, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? The Sony does support EARC. Man, that was a classic blunder. Basically what happened, guys, is, I unboxed the TV practically live, set it right up, started talking about the TV based mostly on all the briefings that Sony gave me. And guess what? Sony never talked about HDMI 2.1 or whether their HDMI 2.0B ports supported EARC or variable refresh rate or any of that stuff. So I assumed that it didn't support EARC, and then there it is right there on the HDMI input panel. There is support for EARC back there. So I'm sorry, I screwed up. You guys have eagle eyes. Way to call me out. I think you should, absolutely. Hold me accountable. But anyway, let's get back to this. The Sony does support EARC. So at some point down the road, if you want to get Dolby Atmos from the TV through the audio return channel down to your AV receiver or maybe a sound bar, that's going to be possible. Full uncompressed audio can be sent down that port. Should be very exciting. The Sony will do that. The Vizio, well, frankly, we don't know. It's possible that Vizio could update this TV to support EARC at some point down the road, but we don't have any knowledge that they're going to do that. And Vizio's official statement is they're always updating their TVs for the best technology support at the best time, which tells me that maybe what we'll see from Vizio is an application of EARC and some other HDMI 2.1 stuff when we actually have some source components that can support them. Here we have the remotes, and I'm happy to see Sony updated theirs. Their remote was the same for like over a decade. And we've got a nice textured backing here, a much longer wand-style remote with a metal finish on the front, all the buttons that you need and several that you probably don't. The Vizio is a bit more compact, but just as functional. It does have more hotkeys at the top, although I only think that 3 of them are going to see any actual use. Really, the most outstanding difference between the remotes, and the reason I'm digging into this at all, is because what you'll notice is that the Vizio does not have a built-in microphone, while the Sony remote does. So here's what that means. With the Vizio TV, you can control it with Google Assistant or Amazon's Alexa. I don't want to set off your speakers. But to do that, you'll need a Google Home device or an Amazon Echo device. With the Sony, it's different. Google Assistant is actually built in, and you have a couple of different options. If you don't like the idea of the TV constantly listening to you, a lot of people don't dig that, you can turn off the auto detection and just use the button on the remote to call up Google Assistant. Or you can have it always listening and say, "Okay, Google," and then Google Assistant will pop up and you can ask it a question, change the channel, turn up or down your lights, or just have it dictate your video to you in real time. Now let's talk user interface, which I think is super important because nobody hates to use their TV. You'd rather it be a joy, right? Well, with both of these TVs, you're looking at Android TV, although Vizio's is heavily customized where Sony's is kind of stock Android TV. And Sony has upped their game big time with the chip that runs Android TV. So it's very responsive, as you can see right here. There's no lag in switching to these various different rows. One thing I do like is that all your apps are right at the top and you can add whatever apps you want to here. What I do not like is that the second ribbon is sponsored content and you cannot move it. I'll show you that in a second. After that, you can reorder these any way you want. So if you watch a lot of live TV, you can put that up top. If you pretty much only stream Netflix or YouTube, you can put that up top. You just go into customized channels and you can turn different ribbons on or off. Like I don't need the Bravia tutorial, so we'll remove that. I do want Netflix on there. Here on the promotional channels, you see you can get rid of that app spotlight if you want to, but you're not going to be getting rid of the sponsored ribbon, which is my biggest knock against it. Otherwise, it works perfectly fine. And again, having Google Assistant built in is clutch for getting exactly where you want to go right away. Vizio's user interface is completely different. It's built on Android, but it's totally customized, which means Vizio can update it whenever it wants, and it does. But it also means that you interact with it differently. It feels completely different. So up at the very top, you can see you've got access to your home screen, movies, shows, watch free. That's basically Pluto TV and extras. If you go down into the interface itself, you get a Discover ribbon, which you can't move, and this is suggested content based on what you like to watch. I don't particularly care for that. And then you've got the Apps ribbon. And you do have to go into the app before you can access any of the content within that app. So let's say I wanted to watch Guardians of the Galaxy. I have to go into Netflix and then go find Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not going to show that I was recently watching that and immediately let me access it. And that's very different than what you get with modern interfaces. Usually you can just hover over the app and see stuff that you watched recently and directly access it. But look, I'm not going to give you a full evaluation of SmartCast on this TV right now, and the reason why is because we have a very early sample. And later this summer, Vizio will release SmartCast 3.0, which is supposed to be vastly different. For one thing, right now, this is really slow and clunky, and I dislike it a lot. But it's supposed to get much faster and much snappier down the road. Also, you're going to get the Apple AirPlay 2 and HomeKit update along with that. So we'll come back to this TV when it has the updated version of SmartCast 3.0 and take a look at it. But for now, if you're going to buy this TV within the next couple days or weeks, know that the user interface is just not great right out of the box right now. In fact, I would suggest you go get a Roku or Amazon streaming stick for like 40 or 50 bucks. Which will support 4K and HDR for all your streaming needs. You don't have to rely on the interface for that, and it's just more enjoyable to use in general. So, picture and sound quality time, everybody's favorite part, right? A couple things I want to get out of the way. First, both TVs support HDR10 and Dolby Vision, so we tested them with material both from 4K Blu-ray and also from streaming. By the way, streaming, Netflix, Our Planet, absolutely gorgeous. It's in 4K and Dolby Vision, as you can see right here. I'll show you that on the Sony as well. Really good stuff, because even though 4K Blu-ray is a better picture quality signal, I think most of us are streaming our content right now, and how a TV handles cleaning that low bitrate content up is really, really important. Now, this is not entirely a fair comparison because the 75-inch and 85-inch version of the Sony have something called X-wide angle, which improves off-angle viewing. The Vizio does not have that feature. However, the 55 and 65-inch versions of the Sony do not have X-wide angle, so it would be a tighter comparison for off-angle viewing. I'm going to say that the X-wide angle does a good job on the larger Sony TVs, but without it, you're looking at basically the similar performance from each TV in terms of what happens when you move off angle. You lose a little bit of color and a little bit of contrast, and that's true for pretty much every LED, LCD TV out there except for the most premium models. Okay, all that out of the way, let's talk about the Vizio. First and foremost, I have to say I am stunned by the performance of this television. It looks very, very similar to the Sony in terms of its color capabilities, contrast. The local dimming algorithm is excellent. It does a really, really good job of preventing blooming or halos around bright objects. It's a very uniform picture. I'm flabbergasted. Now, if I look at both of these TVs at the same time, what I notice is that out of the box, with its calibrated dark setting in particular, the Vizio tends to have sort of a magenta-ish hue to it. It definitely leans towards the red. Now, these are expensive TVs, and you wouldn't normally necessarily think about calibrating a Vizio, but I would suggest it here. This is a high-end TV. It needs to be treated like one, and if you're gonna spend the big bucks to get this TV, I would have a professional calibration done, just to get the color wrangled in a little bit. But that said, right out of the box, the calibrated bright and calibrated dark modes on this TV are really quite excellent, with the exception of the little bit of color shift that we're seeing. And what I was surprised most by was the processing. Vizio's processor is doing an excellent job of cleaning up low bit rate content. It really mitigates any of the color banding that you normally see with low bit rate content. And it's doing a really good job of showing good details in the shadows and tone mapping for HDR. So it's capable of up to 2900 nits of brightness in its brightest mode. When you're in the calibrated dark mode, you're not getting anywhere close to that, but you don't really need it. It's being very judicious about where it applies its brightness, so you get a very vivid picture. The color pops right off the screen. This is a first-class TV from Vizio, and it absolutely stands up to Sony, Samsung, and LG in every way in the premium TV department. Now, moving over to the Sony. Once again, we are in 4K. Dolby Vision is enabled on the television, and it should come as no surprise that this TV looks absolutely fantastic. Sony has been doing a fantastic job for years now. This TV is no exception. It does everything very, very well. There has been some commentary out there about X-wide angle affecting the overall black performance. I'm not noticing that. Generally speaking, I think it's doing an excellent job of tone mapping HDR. It may not have the aggressive brightness capabilities that the Vizio is capable of, but you're not noticing that in real viewing. It does a fantastic job of popping specular highlights while also preserving shadow detail. The colors out of the box are fantastic. Again, I would suggest a calibrator for a TV of this quality just to get it to the perfect spec. There are a few features that the Sony offers that the Vizio doesn't. There is a Netflix calibrated mode here. You can engage that when watching Netflix, and basically that just means that you are seeing what Netflix wants you to see. Believe it or not, Netflix has some very, very strict standards about how their content looks, especially their original content. And when you're in Netflix calibrated mode, it's basically an assurance that the TV matches up to Netflix's standards and expectations. You don't have to turn it on. It doesn't do a particularly great job. But again, I think Sony's processing is top-notch. It really cleans up low bitrate images. It upscales 1080p content extremely well. You're going to be very satisfied with this TV. One area that the Sony does have a distinct advantage in is the sound quality. I know you don't buy a TV of this caliber and fail to put it with a soundbar or a home theater system usually, but some people do use the onboard sound, and know this, if you get the Sony, you're gonna get a great onboard sound experiment. They have some processing built in and specially placed drivers that really make it seem as if the sound is coming from the screen, and you get some really surprisingly effective stereo effects. It's not like the OLED TVs that they make where the screen itself is making the sound, but they kind of fake it with driver placement and processing, and it does a great job. The Vizio not so much. You buy that TV, definitely plan on getting a soundbar or some kind of a home theater system. All right, so which is the better TV? Which should you buy? Guys, I don't know. This is such a tight race. The picture quality from both is fantastic. I'm actually surprised the Vizio is punching as high as it is against the Sony right now. So I really have to take it out of the picture quality. I got to take it out of the price because they're the same and look at other elements. And right now I'd have to say I'd give a slight edge to the Sony. It sounds a little bit better. And the Android TV interface is a little bit easier to use. Also, it has Google Assistant built in. Also, I know Sony has a track record of excellent quality control. I've seen a few issues in the past with Vizio. I can't necessarily hold that against them here though, because the P-Series Quantum X is a next level TV from Vizio. I've never seen anything like it from that company. It's the best TV they've ever produced, and it absolutely stands up, as I said before, against the best from Sony, Samsung, and LG. A true competitor. So it comes down to your personal preference, what you like best, which you think looks better. I think the out-of-box performance from the Sony, a little bit better. So if you're not gonna hire a calibrator to tighten up these TVs, then maybe the Sony's a slightly better choice, but really it's up to you. I think you're gonna be exceptionally pleased with either one.